Hey, Sean, if you're anything like me, you've been spending a lot of time researching what light or lights to buy. As a producer, the first few lights you buy make such an impact on what you're able to do professionally and creatively. And a lot of people buy, cheap little LED panels off Amazon that don't really last as long, and they don't really do as much as they think they will, and they end up regretting them. And so a lot of people, their first light is the Aputure 120D, which is an amazing light. But after using this light for 2 years and comparing to a couple other lights, and as my setup has evolved, I wanted to take a second and talk to you about sort of the 3 main lights I would consider getting if I were you getting started buying lights for video production. Right out of the gate, I've made a few videos about this lately, but Quasar Tubes makes so much sense if you're doing anything with corporate communications. If you're doing anything that's in general nonprofit, interview-driven, anything for clients, anything that's not creative for the sake of creativity. If you're not doing commercials or independent films, if you're just really trying to make money by being a producer to people who pay you, Quasar Tubes make the most sense for the money. You can get these lights for $45 for a tube. It's soft light already. You can add more diffusion, but you don't need to just to be able to use it. Whereas if you get an Aperture 120D or 300D, or if you get any of the Hive lights or any single source light, the Godox light that's out there, any of these lights, you have to put diffusion on them first to be able to use them. So this video is actually being lit by a single Quasar tube set in a vertical orientation just to my right here. And that is the only light that's down here other than the other windows that are letting in a little bit of daylight. The great thing about these quasars is not only are they cheap, but you can get 4 of them for less than $200, put them together to make one like Kino Bank strong key light, or you can take one out of that array and turn it into a hair light or a fill light. You can use them in the background. You can use one as a key and use the other 3 to light other parts of the room. There's so much you can do because you have 4 great quality lights for less than $200. They're 45 bucks each. The trade-off is they're single color. They're only daylight, 5600 Kelvin. But comparing that to the biggest player in this game right now, which is I think the Aputure 120D that every YouTuber has, the big light dome on it, and that's how they get their big soft light. And I don't know why everyone has this light, because for creative applications, it's a single color light. And so in a corporate situation, if you're going into a boardroom, if you're going into someone's facility to record a video, and all of the fluorescents around are, fluorescent 3200, 4400, whatever the other lights are, your light is stuck at 56K. And so you've just spent $1,000 on a light and the diffusion you need to be able to actually use that light in a professional setting, and you're limited to what it can actually do. It is bright. That's the good news. These Aputures are extremely bright, and I've used mine for a long time, but the more I start to use these in different settings, if I don't bring a bunch of lights that play well with the Aputure by itself as a single light really sort of doesn't meld with a lot of backgrounds. And I have the original 120D, and it's balanced to 6000 Kelvin instead of 5600, so it's not even daylight like the rest of daylight lights are. And I know they've changed that with the Mark II and the 300D2 that I have is also 5600 and the original was 6000. But you're limited to what you can do because it's a single color. And so that's why for me, Quasars make sense for this professional application, because it's only $200. You're still stuck with the single color, but it's only $200 for 4 lights. And Quasar does make bicolor LEDs, and actually the light that's lighting me right now is the Quasar Rainbow, which is set to 5600 right now, but it can be any color. It has 360-degree control of hue and saturation and dimmability all the way down to 1%. It's such a versatile light. And it takes so little power, and it's silent. There's no fans. There's no anything you have to compete with. It's a really flexible light. Now, if you're doing independent films or creative projects or anything like that, the lack of flexibility you get from a single color light is gonna burn you out in the long run to an extent, because again, if you can't control everything to match the same color temperature, you're limited to working with trying to balance this with what you have in the background and work with that. However, there's so many good omni-color lights that are out right now, and I think the leader for me in this space right now, affordability-wise and build quality-wise, is Hive Lighting. And so behind me is the Hive Wasp 100C. And the 100CX is a new one that came out, and it's $800. The 120D Mark II is $750. It's $50 more, but for $50 more, it can be literally any color you could possibly want, and you can control all of this from your phone. And you can dim it, and there's all sorts of, I'm not going to go through all of the effects, but I mean, if you want it to be a cop car effect or something, you can do that. We're going to get rid of that and turn it back to something pleasant. You can control all of these things from your phone. The difference between the more expensive C version and the CX version that's new and cheaper, it's the same quality, the same brightness, the same app controls. The only thing you trade off is that on the back of the light, you don't have the physical controls. The C, you have knobs that you can go through and adjust the saturation, the gain. You can go through the effects. You can change the color temperature. The CX, you have to do that through an app. So if you're willing to use an app to have what, in my opinion, is a lot easier control, you can just click things, or you can pay a couple extra $100 to have a control on the back of the camera that's going to let you do that without a phone. But for me, it's a no-brainer. And even though the Hive 100C for $50 more is not as bright as the 120D, you're able to adjust the color on it. Not only can it be any color you can imagine, but it also can be any temperature of white. And throughout your saturation, you can also adjust the white balance of that saturation, which is a really, really cool feature to be able to make really, really good high CRI light. And so you can have a daylight balance, you can have a tungsten balance, you can cycle through all of these things and match your situation. So you trade off a little bit of brightness, but you gain so much in flexibility where you're able to adapt to your environment, you're able to adapt to the other lights that may come to set, you're able to adapt to changing conditions outside of a window that may occur if you're trying to shoot these things. So my thought is, if you've got a bunch of money and you can buy a bunch of lights, grab a couple of these Aputures. They're really bright, they're really convenient, they're easy to work with. If you don't have that much money, investing in a single Aputure light, I don't think is going to get you as far as you want it to get you. Even getting 2 of these Aputure lights, or even 3 of these Aputure lights, you get, yeah, you'll be able to do your 3-point lighting for an interview, but there's so much more you could do with different lights that would give you more flexibility as a producer and as a creator than you would get with a single source, single color LED light and all the modifiers you need to really play with that light in a practical setting. So getting Quasar Tubes adds a little bit more versatility for way less money, or for around the same money, you can get a light that can be any color you can imagine. And so the same thing for the 300D, the bigger brother of the Aputure. There's a Hive 200, I believe it's the Hornet, 200C and CX, which is the same price, maybe again $50 more, but with that, it's way brighter and it can be any color you can possibly imagine. So take some time to look at these lights and really decide, what are you actually going to use it for? What are you going to use it for that's going to be able to make you money? And therefore, what is a good investment for you light-wise? I have to make a disclaimer, this is not a fair fight. My Aputure light does not work right now. It hasn't worked since mid-January, and they're sending me a new control box. They said the control box malfunctions on these, and so actually both my Aputure lights, my 300D shorted out and they needed to send me a replacement, and now my 120D, the controller box stopped working. So I can't actually demonstrate these side by side right now, which I would have really have liked to do so you could see the difference and the practicality of using a Hive light for your key versus a 120D for your key, but alas, I cannot right now, and I'm sorry, and I have to return my Hive light back to Lens Rentals, and so I can't wait for this control box to come in. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about these lights, or if you're considering buying which lights and which modifiers and things like that, I made the mistake of buying a whole bunch of gear so that you don't have to. And so if you've got any questions about the practicality of using these things in an actual professional setting, and again, my expertise and my focus is not making independent films. And if you're doing things that are more narrative, you're going to have a different practical application for these lights, but I still think you're going to want the flexibility that you get with Quasar Tubes and with omnicolored lights than you get over a single color, single source LED. But it's really up to you. But if you have any questions about any of these things and what I've learned the hard way and the expensive way, please let me know so that some of the mistakes that I've made can have some value to you. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.